Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The Ministry of Justice and United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime kindly greets you and welcomes you and thanks you for being here in this special act. Thank you for being in here in this presentation of the results of the monitoring report of territories with the presence of Coca cultivation. We present the results of the study made by SIMSI and the Office of UNODC for the Andean region. Through the implementation of the World Program for Monitoring of Illicit Plants, UNODC works with the most affected countries in the production of drugs to monitor the production and extension of marijuana and coca crops. The we where the studies facilitate and limit sustainability of the actions against illicit economies. This vision has allowed to implement a system of monitoring that not only produces numbers, but also complementary information to facilitate comprehensive understanding of this phenomena. The results presented today correspond to the census of coca crops done with satellite information and flights. We greet everybody connecting through the YouTube channels of the ministry and the UNODC office for the Andean region. For the presentation of the report, we're accompanied in the main table with Dr. Angela Maria Buitrago Ruiz, Ministry of Justice, and Candice Welsh, a legal representative of UNODC for the Andean region and the South. We invite you to follow us on Twitter at MinJusticia and the UNODC for the Andean region at UNODC ROCOL. You can follow with the hashtag Cultivos de Coca. We request to put your cell phones in silence. We begin with a greeting of the UNODC representative with Candice Welsh. Good afternoon, everybody. In this important day for Colombia, I want to greet especially the Minister of Justice, Mrs. Angela Maria Buitrago, the General Secretary of the National Police, General Hernan Meneses, the Director of Drugs, Alexandra Rivera, as well as the guests in this space that is part of the Academy, civil society, and media. The World Report of Drugs for our office in 2024 sees a global increase in consumption. 292 million people, 20% more than 10 years ago, consumed some sort of drug in 2022. The report also indicates that 64 million of these consumers present some type of behavioral problem related with consumption, and 1 of 11 has access to treatment. With respect to cocaine, it is indicated that more than 23 million people consumed it in 2022. When analyzing incantations, we can conclude that the coca market is expanding, not only in the more traditional markets of North America, Europe, and Oceania, but in emerging markets of Asia, Africa, and South America. This growth in demand happens at the same time that an increase of supply. The coca crops are still present in Peru, Colombia, and Bolivia, and recently we've identified in Ecuador and Honduras that demonstrates the expansion in countries of the region. In Colombia in 2023, the area planted increased by 10%, going from 230,000 to 253,000 hectares, which indicates a minor growth compared to the previous year when we reported an increase of 13%. The differences between concentration areas invites to implement a public policy that is key in the territory. In terms of deconcentration, the report focalizes the areas where, with some indexes of 10 years, we find a trend in reduction. There, the crops are smaller, more dispersed, and a productive model predominates with the a peasant economy. The communities in these territories, in particular, are facing difficulties to commercialize products derived from the coca leaf. The illegal actors seem to have less interest in cocaine that can be produced in these territories. The people are seeking productive alternatives, and it's the moment to help them. The programs focused in the reduction of the offer of drugs must leverage in this purpose and must be at the service of people in these territories. In the last few years, the strategies for this module have been conceived based on the precepts of the peace agreement signed in 2016, where we recognize the need to implement solutions of these challenges focused on the defense of human rights, public health, and the conservation of biodiversity. UNODC has accompanied Colombia in the implementation of these strategies, providing technical assistance, amongst others, in the guiding principles of the United Nations on alternative development. This working model has allowed to generate virtuous circles thanks to establishing alliances between the government and other sectors to facilitate commercialization of legal products uh, driven from the interventions with the objective of guaranteeing their profitability and sustainability. Allow me to mention an example. Thanks to the cooperation of Correa's government, we established close to 500 hectares of sachains in Putumayo. Uh, the fruits that have a high nutritional value are commercialized through a scheme of public purchasing signed with ICBF to include them fabricating bienestarina that benefit lactating women and children in Colombia. And these experiences have nourished the process of design of public policy, including the national drug policy that deploys a strategy that oxygenates the affected community by the illegal drug markets, while it asphyxiates narco trafficking through police, military efforts. Focalizing these actions in a balanced way is crucial, and this report and analysis contributes to decision making. On the other hand, the report highlights the production of cocaine increased by 53%. This effect has an explanation. Coca is still concentrated in the areas where productivity is greater in its three phases: growth, extraction, and transformation, making a hectare of coca to produce twice as much as cocaine it produced 11 years ago. Nariño, the department with most crops, has more coca than the other 15 departments put together, including Valle del Cauca and Antioquia. Of course, the problem in Nariño is different in the other 15 departments, and this is what the discussion is about. The concentration is related where coca loses its strategic value in the framework of the armed conflict. And this is how the illicit income works in production and traffic. That is why it's placed in productive and border areas that facilitate traffic and export through the Pacific and Caribbean. These are vulnerable areas that can permeate institutionality through corruption, money laundering, and other crimes that emerge in the territory. There, the communities face very complex situations that compromise their autonomy, relationships with institutions, and environmental sustainability of their territories. Half of deforestation in Colombia happens in these territories, and 84% of the total of chemical substance that requires the production of cocaine, estimated for the whole country, is demanded there. This is an opportunity to face the problematics of drugs, but also of development, governability, and environmental sustainability. Finally, the report alerts of a key event. The economy of the coca is more and more related with illicit economies. The production of coca represents more than 10% of the added value of the economy in 38 municipalities of 181 with the presence of coca crops. And a lot of them is the main source of income. There are municipalities where, even though there's not much, it has a lot of importance in the local economy. This requires a specific look from implementations of policies. 86% of populated areas close to the crops. This means that transactions between the coca economy and legal economies are done in sub-municipal scenarios where it's difficult to have state presence. This is a key point in the focalization of strategies in populated areas like Guevara and Tibú and San Pedro in El Charco, in the Zabalata in Tumaco. For these territories, it's key to think of the strengthening of the local capacities, both of communities and governments. From UNODC, we technically support and provide tools to the government to reinforce actions of authorities in the prevention, investigation, and sanction of related crimes. This includes initiatives in borders, ports, a river, and land, as well as a focus to identify typologies of money laundering related to drug trafficking and mitigating associated corruption risks. The data that we present require intervention models based on evidence that prioritize sustainability. During more than 20 years, UNODC has developed this report, generating data that show the dynamics of the coca phenomena. From this experience, we provided historically valuable inputs for decision making by part of the state to understand this problematic. Today, we reiterate our commitment to support the Colombian government in improving the conditions of the territories and the capacities of institutions in benefit of development based on legality and friendly with the environment. Thank you.
Thank you to Mrs. Wells. Now we're going to show the technical report according to the coordinator of this illicit crops, Dr. Leonardo Correa. Thank you so much. Good afternoon to the ministry, to the representative. I'm going to go to the presentation in a very fast way. I would like you to see it in this screen. I would like to start emphasizing in the importance of understanding the global framework to understand the local framework. This is a key point. So it's key to understand is that this is a scenario of increasing the consumption. The problematic framework is also increasing, and the situation of difficulties in treating this problem. Also, we have a situation where the consumption is not only increasing in the traditional market, but it does also increase in the emergent markets. That means that they do need more cocaine, but that cocaine is required and needed in more spaces, more places. So there are spaces to colonize new spaces of traffic. This is very important to understand what's going on in Colombia. There's more cocaine needed in new places, and what that implies is that there are new actors that want to find new routes. We are in this dynamic where the markets are racing and the offering is also the supply is also increasing. This is what we're seeing in this slide. The increased rhythm in the the hectares that are already planted. Now it's only just the 10%, but as you can see in the slide, we have a problem that the production per hectare is raising, and this is what this report is trying to explain. I like this map with colors that are very strong that you're observing here, where you can find that there are 4 departments that have more than 30,000 hectares, 4 departments where the situation is really complex. But we also have 7 departments where there are many less than 500 hectares. That's a very big contrast. And the way to intervene in one or the others is totally different. I would like to emphasize here also, you can think that there are 4 departments with 3,000 hectares. The big part of the problem is concentrated in these 4 departments from the 122 municipalities. 181 municipalities in Colombia have coca crops. This amount is still too big for what really is going on in Colombia in terms of concentration. That's why I would like you to look at this exercise where Colombia has this advantage of having census comparable ever since the year 2000. This is the comparison of the census, and you can see how the territory has been transforming. The darker places where the coca is, and it is spreading to these other places. This is what's going on in Colombia. We have some areas that are where there's no more coca, and other places where there's more coca concentrated every year more. So the problem is that this areas where the coca is concentrated is where there's more productive areas. This is what this slide shows. If you look at it from the perspective of the year 2015, the average production of coca per hectare is 2,800 kilograms in 2015, but the production today is 8,500 kilograms per hectare per year. And if you don't look at it from the average, national average, but with the productive links, there's a trend to achieve 14 kilograms, 14 tons per hectare per year. If we put this graphic together with the previous map, we can understand that with the increase of the 10%, just with the 10%, the potential production is increasing so much because the coca is going to these areas where there's this high productivity. If you can see this graphic, I don't know if you can see it, but this graphic to the side, it shows precisely with these key areas the amount of hectares that are planted has increased 2 or 3 times as much. So we have coca going to these productive areas, and these areas increasing the productivity. This has a major effect. And then we are making a difference within the country. We have a scenario where the trend is that the coca is just finishing and the armed groups are not interested in there, and a different scenario where the situation is the opposite. There are more crops, more productivity, and more incentives so that the people stay there in terms of productivity in those places. To understand that, what invites us to think, and the policies say it, we have some, let's say, suffocation strategies, oxygen strategies, but the balance between these two depends on our standpoint, where we are making the intervention, and that's why the policies has a focalization part where these results help a lot. I would like to say in this point that we take a look at this small map that we're seeing here, because if it is true that the 15 productive areas that we had identified 3 years ago, we identified it, we have increased 2 or 3, but that's the base. It has been there for 3 years. This are still there, and they're concentrating coca and the coca leaf production. But there's a very big concern of areas that are emerging right now, and they're starting to have this same behavior. We do not qualify them as this productive areas because they are not still don't have their permanence, but there's this incidental plants that they're going to be soon having the same behavior. Let me get deeper into this, in the difference between concentration areas and deconcentration areas, because I think it's totally important for the public policy and a key. Candice mentioned it. in the concentration areas, we have the 47% of all the deforestation of the country. Not only the deforestation with coca. Coca is still not such a big factor as a deforestation factor, but the territory where the coca is at, it is a territory where deforestation is very strong. At 47% of all of deforestation that happens in Colombia is right there in those areas. In opposition to the deconcentration areas, we're talking about the 18%. And here in this slide that we have a lot to talk about. Another data that I think is important. It's not only a problem that there's cocaine production in that area, in the concentration areas, but there's also the illegal mining is also concentrated there. So what's going on in the countries that we have some areas that we can be optimistical, and some other areas that where we have to act upon them, because the problem is really getting bigger and it's really bad. So I would like to think again about focalization, and that's why we have the 10 municipalities where there's the most coca crops, maybe half of the coca, 45% of the coca in just 10 municipalities. And in the other extreme, 65 municipalities where there's less than 100 hectares. These are the tools of focalization that I'm talking about. Here we can know if we're going to make an intervention here in Tumaco or in Tibu, well, we're going to have to do it in a different way as we would do it in an area where we have less than 100 hectares. The report tries to develop an idea that I think that is a key idea in this concentration, deconcentration scenarios. And it is that the effect of the concentration is that the illicit economies, especially in some territories, would have a specific weight, very strong. It's true that the majority of the coca, 86% of the population centers are at the sub-municipality, let's say, level. The majority of the coca is still far away in isolated territories. 86% of the populated centers, its sub-municipality is still, but if you look 15 kilometers away from the town, or not, I mean from the towns, not populated centers, you're going to find 93,000 hectares of coca. And that's a different, very big difference, because it's not the same to think about in this isolated or is to intervene those areas, or areas that we are intervening. So sometimes we have schools, hospitals in towns, police station, our institutions have a more capacity there than in those populated centers that are isolated. And this is the base for us to think about in this more comprehensive interventions. And there's something here that I thought that it is important, because we developed and we found this is with the, populated centers. But what happened with the market centers? What we want to produce in these territories, we can commercialize it in the municipality centers, but we should have to have the capacity to take it to these really metropolitan centers, because there are more people for us to buy the coffee, corn, yuca, etc., that we produce there in the territories. So there we have some important names like Popayan. 59% of the coca would have the metropolitan center would be Popayan. 59%, more than half of the coca of the country would have that center of that metropolitan center, Popayan. Is it capable? Is Popayan capable to assume that production that we would like to do in those territories? There we would have to think about public policy strategies. This element here to reinforce the previous idea. If you see in the red color in the map, these are the increasing area between 2022 and 2023, and these are you can see some areas there close to these areas in Cauca that really grew a lot. Those red spots, the coca increased a lot. And there I would like to mention that those places are very close to a city that is Cali, a very important city. So the profile, what we're thinking here is, this is not really a peasant. How are we going to make for him to take his crops out to take him to these important places. This is a totally different profile, and we have to think to incorporate this in our public policy design. In this map here, we want to show, we want to compare the illicit economy that is derived from the coca leaves in base in the territories with the total economy weight in the territory. What we can observe here is that there are some places where the coca really has a lot of weight in the local economy. There are places where it's not so heavy, let's say, but you can see in this darker places in the map, the specific weight of the coca is very strong in some places. So what we have to think is that, let's suppose we have a magic solution and we start and we just take out all of these coca today, for example, when this coca represents 40% of the economy of that territory. What would be the effect that we generate there? What's going to happen to those territories there? And here is really important to have a strategy that would make it in the right order. Let's correct the vulnerabilities, let's create opportunities, and then we think how we can take the coca out from that territory. There is a challenge there where we're going to have to look for a balance, and we have to work here. We have to work here with people here, but with people there, especially because the actors there are the ones to understand when they are ready for them to have this 40% of their productivity taken away. So this is a very valuable information. I invite you to please know with more detail this exercise. Let's think about the impact. If one adds up the agriculture sector and the industrial sector in Colombia, if you add them up, that's at 20% of the economy of Colombia. Just for us to think, what is the implication to take out the 20% from an economy at a municipality level? And here, let's say it again, let's go back to our image, deconcentration areas and concentration areas, concentrated areas, because the armed group's role, it is still fundamental, it is very important still. And we have a risk here of thinking that maybe because there's no coca, there's not going to be any kind of problems. But in these deconcentration areas, unfortunately, even if the coca is just decreasing, there's still problems, still armed groups, not the same groups that have a connection with drug trafficking or with the criminal groups that are transnational these groups, but they are armed groups in this area because this area is full of vulnerabilities and gaps from the institution of the state. They're still there. They're looking for their, sources of crime. This is a truth that we have to work on, and we have to think that of the fact that even if the fact that there's no coca there, that doesn't mean the situation is over there is positive. In the concentration areas, this is the graphic that you can watch now. The territories where the coca is at, there are some local bands that are in charge of negotiating at a local level, and they have a relationship with the armed groups within a national wide. Without belonging to them, there's not a belonging kind of relation with this band. This belongs to this national group. No, it's just a sort of a local agreement, and these national groups have also some sort of agreements with the transnational groups without having to belong to them. And for me, this is really important when thinking who's the actor we should really take out from there. How do we do it to take out that taking the actors really take us to the solution of all? I don't know how am I doing with time, but I have to finish now. But I cannot finish or I cannot go without speaking about the element of the cocaine production as a threat for the conservation of the biological biodiversity and cultural biodiversity. This is a speech that many that have been with me, they can say they have seen this slide. That half of the crops are in the areas of the interest for conservation, natural parks, reservoirs, indigenous places. 20% of the coca of the country is in the Afro-Colombian land. The fact that the coca is there, it's a problem, yes, but everything around it is the real problem for our communities. Not just the coca, it's just everything around it. So I would like to insist in this point. The problem is not that there are some hectares of coca. The problem is that to produce and extract cocaine, we need almost 1 million cubic meters of inputs of products and a lot of tons of solid input. We don't need. They need. They need to construct roads for that, corrupt, so that the trucks can have all their loads taking and take out all of the drugs and have a security system so that they would be allowed to take out the drug and etc. Everything around the coca, not only the plants are the problem, and all of these elements in this area are threatening really not only the biodiversity in the place, but our capacity to protect that biodiversity. This makes the leaders, the environmental leaders, are under risk in those places more than in any other place. Not only but because of what is going on there, and because how difficult it is for us or the work for the government to control those territories. Thank you so much for your attention. I invite you now to see the report. It's really interesting. You have a lot of data here, and those that are working in trying to take this policy and focalize it and act and do things with that, I really invite you to look at it in detail. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Leonardo Correa. Next, we will hear the words of the Minister of Justice, Doctora Ángela María Buitrago. Thank you, good afternoon. It is a pleasure to greet the Regional Director of the UNODC, Andrews Welsh. Thank you. All of you here in this room, the police, Navy, I believe their permanent support for the government in this situation is very important, but also very important in that we've received a lot of inputs and elements that we're going to value from 2 points of view. Obviously, Dr. Mauricio Olarte, Vice Minister of Restorative Justice, Alvarez, Director of Drugs and Activities, Leonardo Correa, with his study and research and presentation that means creating some alerts. I believe it's important to understand that the media, we thank you're present. This is a subject that has no veto because it's part of the transparency of our government. The government is a leader in the environmental global agenda, and all of these inputs and evidence make it to promote a series of decisions around these aspects, and from there we can say that the results of the report are highlighted by the Ministry of Justice in the following. I'm going to be very clear. You're going to be able to see the report on the links, but we understand that the coca crop is still a challenge in Colombia. The relevant result from here is that between 2022 and 2023, the area increased by 10% of coca crops, getting to 253,000 hectares. But to put this number in perspective, it is important to see how this report and the prior one allow us to remind us that in 2021, it generated an increase in coca crops of 40%. This means that technically, in terms of quantity and percentage, it has reduced to 10%. And from there, the increase has decelerated. This means that the graphs that Leonardo showed you, you see how there's a peak in 2021, and then we have a flat line, and then it decreased. Well, that is what the president has explained. We don't say this. This is said by the UNODC. The crops are of coca are 60% are in 60% of municipalities of the country, and one third of these has less than 100 hectares. Why is this important? It has not disappeared by art of magic. Is that there is a policy that has influence in this decrease in these municipalities, and this policy from the Ministry of Justice has been consistent and stronger in this second push to try to understand that 10% of municipalities concentrate 45%. It's important to see how we're going to focus, but it's one of the policies of the ministry to focus in these areas that are very key. From there, we'll see how the government is concentrating. This is not only the Ministry of Justice, it's several entities and organisms of the government is concentrating in particular efforts in the region of the Pacific, in Catatumbo and Putumayo. During the last 3 years, 33.5% of affected municipalities has had a process of abandonment of the coca crops. And from there, it's important to highlight this is not because of magic, it's because particularly the departments of Caquetá, Guaviare, Meta, and Vichal are in a blue zone. If I interpreted correctly the colors, this means that we generated a procedure of cleanup in these municipalities. It is consolidated a clear trend to concentration areas and deconcentration areas, as Leonardo explained, but maybe the most relevant thing is to understand how these areas of concentrations are border areas. And this is vital because every day we see how we're looking for these enclaves to be able to use geostrategically the traffic of this alkaloid. And from there, we see how environmental risks are a reality being analyzed by the Ministry of Justice in collaboration with all corresponding units of the government. 48% of coca is concentrated in special management areas, as you said, Leonardo. But it is important to understand that the zones of the natural parks and the territories of Afro and the Indian reservations and forest reservations are making up 48% or used by this type of crop. The situation because represents a risk for conservation of biological and cultural biodiversity, something that we've been a pioneer in, and the president has led this campaign at a worldwide level. That is why we're very interested in so that biodiversity can be affected, and this is an important area of focus, not only because we're interested in the environment, but because it is really the future and the lungs of the world. From there, we understand that 54 species are also in critical danger. According to UCNI, there's a red list of threatened species for the conservation of nature. This means that criminal actions are impacting directly these species that are threatened. Some species are crustaceans, birds, mammals, mollusks, amphibians, and reptiles and plants. This represents an ecosystem and is generating laws regarding organized crime. The context to read these results is important for us to understand that the increase in demand at a worldwide level pressures the increase of the grown crops, not only in Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. This leads us to report 23.5 million people who have consumed cocaine in the world. Between 1994 and 2023 in Colombia, and this is very important, we eradicated forcefully a total of 2,900,000 hectares of coca, and the problem is still unsolved. That is why it's so important to use new mechanisms, new methods. That is what we tried to do from the Ministry of Justice. In the prior government, we eradicated around 400,000 hectares of coca crops. The grown area increased by 49% between 2019 and 2022. This means that the eradication is not a significant solution, and that is why we're betting on other elements. Even though forceful eradication was reduced by 70% for several reasons, because the Constitutional Court prohibited the use of aerial spraying pesticides, also because of the risk and the reality of loss of life in manual eradication that has cost a lot of lives, also means that the increase of crops regarding this with respect to 2022 was only 10%. This is important to understand. What is it that we want with this evidence is to work on the database to be able to push policies that from this point of view we're driving and we consider to be a new drug policy, understanding to make an emphasis in rural development, not abandoning the option of eradication. I don't know if you know this. We're going to start eradicating controlled with land aspersion that guarantees no environmental damage like glyphosate did. But also, we're talking about intervening the structural causes of the problem. The intervention of the structural causes means working with a series of opportunities for families that in this case has 253,000 hectares, which is approximately 231,000 families that have no other opportunities, no other business, or have no other economic options, and have no results because of climate change or organized crime, etc. The drug policy promotes not only strategy that asphyxiates, that's a policy of the ministry, but from this point of view, we've intensified the elements in collaboration with National Police, the Navy, and the Ministry of Justice in asphyxiating strategic nodes. And this means that we're working on the strategic nodes of the criminal system. The results of this asphyxiation, so you have parameters to measure it. In 2023, the National Police and the Armed Forces seized 742,000 kilograms of cocaine, which means a number with no precedent in Colombia. In 2023, we seized 984 tons of coca leaf, 46% more than in 2022 when we seized 600 tons. We seized 93,000 kilograms of coca base, and we dismantled 209 laboratories and 5,000 infrastructure to produce base, as well as clandestine labs of permanganate of potassium. We also reported a seizure of 400 kilograms of cocaine and 62,000 kilograms of coca base. 120 laboratories were destroyed, 3,400 infrastructure of production of coca base, and 15 laboratories of clandestine production of potassium permanganate. We've extradited 101 persons for crimes related to narco trafficking. The General Prosecutor's Office affected 4,000 assets that were seized for crimes related to narco trafficking for a value that is over 1.4 billion pesos. From that point of view, you can see how the asphyxia is multifaceted. We have several strategies to be able to accomplish a result. And the oxygen in 2023, the destination of the resources coming from property seizures. Approximately in prior years, 70% of these resources was invested in police and military strategies. Today, the Ministry of Agriculture and Environment have a greater role in the comprehensive response, thinking in serving the vulnerabilities of the territories. We implemented the strategy of territorial missions that we consider is a crucial node of Catatumbo, Pacifico, Meta, Guaviare, and the Amazon. Through the interagency action, we seek that rural communities can transit progressively and sustainably to licit economies through a process of reconversion. The missions are designed with territories, hand in hand with ethnic communities, peasant organization, and other strategic actors. The missions include strategic alliances with the private sectors and international cooperation, together with the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of the Environmental, Ministry of Health, Commerce and Equality, and the Directorate of Crop Substitution. We focalized 5 missions. The Ministry of Justice began the projects that was supported technically and financially with 12 initiatives that were productive from communities, from peasants, in the Indian reservations, concentrating in Catatumbo, Nariño, Guaviare, and the south of Bolivar. I must say this, we anticipate the notes of concentration before receiving the report, because this policy has been quite interesting in this policy strategy. These projects were focused in products such as cocoa, sustainable cattle ranching, fruits, agricultural productive systems, conservation forests. In 2024, this bank financed 14 productive projects in the departments of Nariño, Chocó, and Meta for a value of 9,300 million pesos. As a result of the government, we've delivered 5,000 deeds of property of people that voluntarily eradicated their coca crops, and now they have a legal property on their property, but also successful agricultural projects. We reaffirmed our objective of fulfilling our objectives in the substitution of crops, and in August 2024, we committed resources for the execution of the program that go above 2.3 billion pesos for more than 80,000 families linked to the program. The SAA has delivered 90 assets that include property, rural property, urban property, and mostly vehicles, destined to strengthening the activities developed by social organizations whose nature seeks to contribute to peace building. And from that point of view, they have been generators of an alliance with the Ministry of Justice, and the SAI reported the delivery of these properties. 40% of the assets delivered corresponds to the departments of Valle del Cauca, Cauca, and Antioquia. The government has delivered in only 2 years resources for 635,000 million to 3,600,000 homes through the programs of social prosperity. Agro grew by 6% in the prior year, with investment placing more credits, access to land, and formalization of property is due to this support. So conclusions: the responses of repressive order to respond to the challenge of illicit crops are insufficient, and the results are not permanent. We have a bet on sustainable solutions that demand time, articulation, resources, and time. I reiterate the commitment of the national government and this ministry in the implementation of a drug policy that not only attacks manifestations of narco trafficking but also confronts the structural causes from a perspective of social justice and environmental justice. A comprehensive approach that respects the rights of communities, the environment, and combats frontally organized crime. The numbers today show that this is a persistent problem in the majority of municipalities. The affectation has been maintained in the last 20 years. The majority of the Coca is still in territories with high vulnerability and difficult to access. Narco trafficking and coca cultivations is the result of deep structural problems like the lack of access to land, economic exclusion, and the historical abandonment of the government in these territories. This is not only a question of national security, but a deep challenge that involves social justice, human safety, protection of the environment, and our capacity to build a complete peace. I thank all of you for your presence, UNODC for their work and report. This is fundamental inputs that we will take into account and continue to work on to look for solutions that really transform the territory and allow to guarantee human rights, and from that point of view not only end with the production of coca but the illicit activities generated through other media or mechanisms that without a doubt is what we've seen are the generators of disprotection in territories and the enrichment of criminal organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Justice Ministry. I want to tell you right now that in this moment, the executive summary and the municipality data in the study, you can consultate them in the webpage of the Observatory of Colombia of the Justice Ministry of Colombia, www.odyssey.org.com. We thank all of the assistants and the press members to come to this event with the presence of the Coca Crops 2023, and we also inform you that from this moment, the report, the complete report, it's available at the webpage of the UNODC of Colombia. You can see the link in the screen of this transmission. So now we're gonna start with the questions. It's a limited time that of questions that could be solved by the Ministry of Justice, Angela Maria Buitrago, and the Mrs. Candice Welch, the UNODC representative for the South America. So we'd like the press members to be concrete and just to be brief. Those that want to place their microphones on the main table can do that now. We kindly request that please, we're going to give you everyone their own number. Please raise your hand and we'll give you the right number and we'll give you the microphone to ask the question. Please be specific who are you addressing the question to. And if you have any more questions, I would like you to raise your hand again. Please ask just one question, and we're not going to answer questions without this turns shift. So we start now. Who in the press would like to ask a question? Luis Jaime Acosta, the International Reuters Agency. The question for the representative, Dr. Candy. How to explain that with this increase of the crops of 10% in 2023, the potential capacity of the production of cocaine has been increased in 53%. As we have explained already, there are two important factors to understand this. One is that this 10% of the increase that we see in the recent years it is in the more productive areas of the country, and the productivity has changed a lot. So that has a very important impact over the potential production. We have also seen that 2 years ago there was a very important increase in the already planted area, and we know that the most productive plants have an age of 2 and 4 years. So those are the factors that together that make this difference between the planted area and the potential production. Any additional question? Please, the microphone. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Ministry. Mateo Piñeros, Blue Radio. You talk about the terrestrial spray? It's a different liquid from glyphosate. What liquid you're talking about, and when and how is this new modality with this new liquid is going to start? Thank you. This topic in particular, we're going to leave it like that because it's not still in the report, and we have this condition that only what it is in the report is going to be answered to. But this is very important because we're just to say that we're looking for other ways of eradicating. Thank you. Any other question? As the Ministry of Justice, maybe the topic is very clear. We have no more questions. Oh yes, we do. Sara Quevedo from El Tiempo, Representative Candice. If the productivity of the Coca plant increases through the years, 2 to 4 years is more productive. This has to do with the lack of spraying. No, it's just the nature of the coca plant that just the most productive age is between the 4 and 4 years. The plant, it has nothing to do with the other thing. But let's say when there is no spraying in the territories where they're planted, they had more options to grow. So that's why the cocaine production increased. No, it's more the trend that we have seen, which is that there is this concentration in the production. We have seen these productive sites near these places that all of the production has changed a lot. This is a trend we have seen in these last years. So the production is industrialized, and if I can use this term, they're using more productive varieties and more productive ways on how to plant, the use of chemicals, fertilizers. So there are many different ways, and with all of these, we have seen a very big change, meaningful change in the productivity of the plant. That is why there is such an important increase in the potential production. Any other question? Well, if there are no more questions for persons in the panel, this is the end part of this event. We are finishing. We wish you the best rest of the day from the Ministry of Justice and the Office of the UN for Drugs, UNODC. We will see each other in the future. Thank you so much. Bye bye.